somewhere along the way, you became very good at being who the world needed you to be. You learned the roles, you wore the names, you showed up in the ways that kept the peace, filled the silence, as satisfied the expectations, and you did it so well for so long that somewhere in the middle of all that performing, you lost the thread back to yourself, not dramatically, not all at once. The way a fire doesn't extinguish in a single moment, it dims, slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day you look at the life you have carefully constructed and feel beneath the surface of everything that looks correct from the outside, a hollow, a quiet, persistent, unsettling hollow where something real used to be. You have felt it in the moments between tasks, when the noise briefly stops and something underneath surfaces, not with words, but with a feeling, a pressure, a longing so ancient it predates any memory you can trace it to. The feeling that there is a version of you that has never been fully seen, not by the world, not by the people closest to you, perhaps not even by yourself. This is not a crisis. This is an invitation. What you are feeling, that restlessness, that reaching, that quiet refusal to be fully satisfied by a life lived only on the surface, is not a symptom of something broken in you. It is the deepest, most authentic part of you, pressing its hands against the glass, asking to be let back in. The true self does not disappear when we bury it beneath roles and conditioning and the accumulated weight of a world that rewards performance over presence. It waits, patient as stone, certain as the tide. It has been waiting for you to turn back toward it, and something, some frequency, some thread of readiness brought you here today. If you feel that in your body right now, that quiet recognition, drop the word real in the comments, not as a gesture, as a marker, a small sacred acknowledgement between you and the part of yourself that has been waiting for permission to be seen. And if this is already landing somewhere deeper than your mind, let the frequency know, press like, not for the numbers, for the resonance. What you choose to amplify is what you call more of into your life. Long before you had this body, before this name, this face, this particular chapter of your story was written, there existed a version of you that needed no introduction, a self so complete, so luminous, so certain of its own nature that the very concept of searching for identity would have made no sense, because there was nothing to search for. It simply was, whole, known, unmistakably itself. That is the self you came from, and that is the self that the deepest levels of human consciousness, accessed not through philosophy, but through direct, trembling, first-hand experience across thousands of individual accounts, confirm has never actually left you. It did not get lost. It got covered, layer by layer, year by year, experience by experience, each layer placed there not by malice, but by the very nature of what it means to compress an infinite soul into a finite human life. The covering was necessary for the journey, but the journey has brought you here, and here is where the uncovering begins. The teachers who went deepest into the mystery of who we really are, who guided ordinary people past the surface of their conscious minds into the vast knowing that lies beneath, returned again and again with the same discovery. The true self is not something you build. It is not something you earn through enough therapy, enough meditation, enough years of getting it right. It is something you remember, and the remembering does not require perfection. It does not require that you have your life together, or your wounds fully healed, or your questions finally answered. It requires only this: a willingness to turn toward what is real inside you, even when what is real feels unfamiliar, even when the true self feels like a stranger, because here is what the stranger actually is. It is the most intimate thing you have ever known. It just has been a very long time since you have been properly introduced. There was a moment early in this life, before the conditioning had fully settled, when you knew exactly who you were. You did not know it as a thought. You knew it the way a river knows its direction, not by deciding, but by simply being what it is, moving naturally, without apology, without the constant self-monitoring that comes later after the world has spent enough time communicating, sometimes loudly, sometimes in whispers, that who you naturally are requires adjustment. You remember that child, even if the memory is faint, of themselves, that the people around them, that the people around them could most comfortably hold. That child was not naive. That child was close to something that years of living in the world gradually teaches us to move away from. Not because life is cruel, though it can be, but because the very nature of human experience involves a kind of forgetting that is, at the deepest level, entirely intentional. Long before this life began, before you chose this family, this body, this specific geography of challenge and gift, there was an understanding in the part of you that exists beyond all of this, that to truly grow, a soul must forget what it knows, not permanently, not completely, but enough that the rediscovery becomes meaningful, enough that the journey back to the true self carries the weight of something genuinely earned rather than simply inherited. The forgetting was not a mistake. It was the design, and the life you have lived, with all its specific texture of loss and love and confusion and searching, was not a series of obstacles placed between you and your true self. It was the curriculum through which your true self was being deepened. Every wound that cracked you open, every relationship that held a mirror to something you had not yet seen, every season of darkness that stripped away another layer of what was not real, all of it in service of this, the returning. The accounts that came through the deepest levels of hypnotic regression, where ordinary people spoke in voices that knew things they had never been taught, described again and again a self that exists beyond the personality, beyond the name and the history and the particular configuration of experiences that we typically call me, a self made of pure awareness, of knowing without needing to learn, of love without needing a reason, of presence so complete that the very concept of emptiness becomes incomprehensible from within it. This is not a description of something you might become after enough spiritual work. This is a description of what you already are, beneath the roles, beneath the wounds, beneath the carefully constructed self that learned very early how to survive in a world that did not always make space for what was real. Tonight, before sleep finds you, try this. Lie still. Let the day release from your body the way water releases from a cloth that has been held too long. And then, gently, without pressure, ask yourself this question, not in your mind. Lower it into your chest, into the space beneath the heartbeat. Who was I before I learned to be afraid? Do not force an answer. Do not construct one. Simply ask and breathe and remain open to whatever arises, not as a thought, but as a feeling, a warmth, an image, a sudden, unexpected sense of recognition, so quiet and so certain it requires no confirmation from anywhere outside yourself. That response, however it comes, is the true self beginning to speak. And here is what is important to understand about that self. It is not fragile. It has not been damaged by everything that covered it. It has not been diminished by the years of performing, of shrinking, of being someone other than itself in order to be loved or accepted or simply left in peace. The true self does not accumulate damage the way the personality does. It simply waits, with a patience that has no frustration in it, with a certainty that has no anxiety in it, with a love for the human version of itself, for you living this difficult and beautiful life that is so complete it would overwhelm you if you felt it all at once. You are not behind. You have not failed the journey by taking so long to find your way back. Every moment of the searching was the path, and the path has brought you here, to this, to now, to the beginning of remembering something so fundamental, so intimately yours, that the recognition of it will feel less like discovery and more like coming home. Nobody sits you down one day and says, "From this point forward, you will learn to be someone other than yourself." It does not happen like that. It happens in the smallest moments, the ones that seem insignificant at the time, the ones that leave no visible mark, but settle quietly into the body and the nervous system, and the deepest operating instructions of a young soul still learning what the world is and what it requires. It happens the first time you expressed something real and the room went uncomfortable, the first time your natural way of being was met not with welcome but with correction, the first time you understood, without anyone saying it directly, that certain parts of you were acceptable and certain parts needed to be managed. And so you managed them with the extraordinary resourcefulness of a child who simply wants to belong, who simply wants to be loved without condition, which is the most fundamental need any human soul carries into incarnation. You adapted, and the adaptation was not weakness, it was intelligence, it was survival. It was the most loving thing you could do for the people around you who had their own layers, their own coverings, their own unhealed places that could not yet make room for all of what you were. But the adaptation had a cost, and the cost was distance between the self that learned to perform and the self that simply, quietly, persistently is. Long before the conditioning began, before the first layer settled, the soul that is you existed in a state that the deepest accounts of consciousness accessed through regression describe with remarkable consistency, complete self-knowing, not arrogance, not ego, the opposite of both. A state of being so fully at home in its own nature that self-doubt was not even a concept available to it. A state where the question, "Am I enough?" would have been as meaningless as asking whether the sun is bright enough to be the sun. You came from that. You carry that still, beneath every layer, beneath every learned smallness, beneath every strategy you developed for moving through a world that sometimes felt too sharp for the frequency you were born carrying. The light did not go out, it got covered, and covered light is still light. It is simply waiting for the layers to be lifted. This is the work that no external achievement can do for you. Not the career, not the relationship, not the version of success the world held up as the destination that would finally make you feel like yourself. Those things can be beautiful. They can be meaningful. They can be genuine expressions of who you are when they arise from the true self rather than from the wound. But they cannot do the uncovering. The uncovering is an inside movement, a turning of attention, slow, gentle, without the violence of self-criticism, toward the places where you learn to be less than what you are, not to condemn those places, not to excavate them with the frantic energy of someone trying to fix themselves, but to witness them with the particular quality of compassionate attention that the true self, when you begin to access it, extends naturally toward the human self that did its best with what it had. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the youngest version of yourself that you can access, the child before the major adaptations, before the significant covering settled. See them clearly, the specific quality of their eyes, the particular way they held their body before the world taught them to hold it differently. And notice what was alive in that child that is perhaps quieter in you now. What quality? What way of moving through the world? What particular light? You do not need to have the answer immediately. Simply sit with the question and let it do its work beneath the surface of your conscious mind, because here is what those who have been guided into the deepest levels of their own consciousness, past the personality, past the conditioned self, into the vast awareness that underlies all of it, have discovered without exception. Nothing was ever lost. Every quality that was covered is still present. Every gift that was made to feel too much or too strange or too inconvenient for the spaces you moved through, still intact, still waiting, still completely available to you the moment you turn towards it with willingness rather than judgment. The covering can be lifted, not all at once, not through force, not through the grim, determined project of self-improvement that the world offers as a substitute for genuine return, but through something much simpler and much more radical. Attention, the steady, patient, loving attention of someone who has decided, finally, after all the years of looking everywhere else, to look within and to trust what they find there. Even if what they find feels unfamiliar, even if what they find feels too large for the life they have been living, especially then, because that largeness, that sense of something within you that exceeds every container you have tried to fit it into, that is not delusion. That is the true self making itself known, asking with the patience it has always had and will always have, "Are you ready to come home?" You did not arrive at this moment by accident. Something in you has been moving toward this for longer than you realize. Not the conscious you, not the version of you that makes lists and manages days and navigates the visible surface of a life, but the deeper you, the one that operates beneath all of that, the one that has been quietly, persistently steering you toward exactly the experiences, the questions, the disruptions, and the openings that were necessary to bring you to this point of genuine turning. The remembering does not begin when everything is finally in order. It begins in the middle of the mess, in the ordinary Tuesday, in the moment of exhaustion when the performance finally costs more than you have left to give, and something underneath, something that has been patient for a very long time, rises into the space that the performance vacated. That rising is not a breakdown. That rising is the true self seizing the opening. Think about the moments in your life when you felt most like yourself, not most successful, not most admired, not most in control of how you were being perceived, most yourself. Perhaps it was in nature where there was no audience and no role to maintain, and the air simply asked nothing of you except your presence. Perhaps it was in a conversation so genuine that the careful management of self briefly became unnecessary. Perhaps it was in creating something, anything, where the analytical mind stepped back and something that needed no instruction simply moved through your hands. In those moments, what you were experiencing was not an exception to who you are. It was the rule. It was the true self, briefly unobstructed, briefly free of the covering, moving with the ease and the certainty that is its natural state when the layers are not present to complicate it. And what you felt in those moments, that aliveness, that rightness, that sense of being precisely and completely where and what you are supposed to be, that is available to you not just in rare moments of perfect circumstance. That is available to you as a way of living. The accounts that emerge from the deepest levels of consciousness, where souls in full awareness spoke of their nature and their purpose without the filter of conditioned personality, described the true self not as a destination to be reached, but as a frequency to be returned to, not achieved, returned to. The distinction matters enormously, because achievement implies a gap, a distance between where you are and where you need to be, a deficit that must be corrected through sufficient effort and discipline and time. But returning implies something already present, already real, already yours, simply waiting for the attention that allows it to be recognized. And the attention, that is what is shifting in you right now. Something is orienting. Something is turning slowly, the way a plant turns toward light, not by deciding to, but by following the deepest instruction of its own nature. You are turning toward your own light. Tonight, before sleep, find a few minutes of genuine stillness, not the stillness of exhaustion, the chosen stillness, the deliberate setting down of the day, and breathe slowly, deeply, until the surface of your mind begins to quiet. Then place one hand on your chest. Feel the warmth beneath your palm, the steady, faithful rhythm that has kept going through every season of forgetting, every chapter of covering, every year of being someone other than yourself. And into that warmth release this, not as a demand, not as a prayer exactly, but as a gentle conscious permission. I am ready to remember. I am ready to know myself truly. I release every version of me that was built for survival rather than truth. And I welcome, with patience, with compassion, with trust, whatever rises in its place. Then simply breathe and listen, not for a voice, not for a vision, but for the quality of what arises in the stillness that follows. Perhaps it will be a warmth that settles in your chest, like something returning home. Perhaps an image will rise, a memory, a landscape, a quality of light that feels more like recognition than imagination. Perhaps simply a feeling, quiet, steady, unmistakable. This is real. This is me. Whatever arises, receive it without analysis, without immediately translating it into something the logical mind can manage and categorize and file away. Simply receive it, like a letter from the deepest part of yourself that has been waiting a very long time to be read, because here is what is true. The remembering does not require you to become something new. It requires you to become willing to stop being something old, to release gently, without drama, with the quiet confidence of someone who has finally understood that what they were performing was never the point, the versions of yourself that were constructed for an audience, and to stand, perhaps for the first time in a very long time, in the simple, extraordinary fact of your own being, not explained, not justified, not made palatable for anyone else's comfort, simply present, simply real, simply, finally, beautifully, completely you. The self that existed before the world offered its opinions. The self that will exist long after this particular chapter closes. The self that has been here the entire time, beneath everything, patient and luminous and more certain of your worth than you have perhaps ever allowed yourself to be. That self is not far away. It is not locked behind years of work still to be done. It is here, right now, in the quality of your attention as you receive these words, in the quiet recognition moving through you even as you read. That recognition, that is the remembering beginning, and once it begins, it does not stop. There is a particular moment that comes in the life of every soul that has been searching, and it does not arrive with fanfare. It does not announce itself with the dramatic clarity that the searching mind imagined it would. It does not come as a sudden blinding revelation that reorganizes everything overnight into perfect luminous order. It comes quietly, like the moment a long-held breath is finally released, like the sensation of setting down something heavy you had been carrying for so long you had forgotten you were carrying it, like recognizing a face you have known your entire life in a mirror you had been avoiding. It is the moment when the searching stops, not because the questions have all been answered, but because something deeper than the questions has been touched, something that does not need the questions answered in order to feel complete. The true self, present, undeniable, here, always here, long before this life, before the forgetting, before the covering, before the performance of being human, required everything you had. You existed in a state of such complete self-knowing that the very journey you have been on would have been incomprehensible from within it. Why would a being of such wholeness need to search for itself? And yet the journey was chosen, deliberately, lovingly, with a wisdom so vast that the human mind can barely hold it. Because wholeness that has never been tested does not know itself as wholeness. Light that has never known darkness cannot fully know itself as light. The true self that descends into the forgetting and navigates the covering and endures the long seasons of searching and finds its way back, knows itself in a way that the self which never left could never know. You did not come here despite the difficulty. You came here for it, for what it would press out of you, for what it would deepen in you, for what it would reveal about the nature of your own light when that light was asked to sustain itself through conditions that seemed designed to extinguish it. And it's sustained. You are here, still burning. This is what the deepest levels of consciousness, accessed in the space between one life and the next, where souls speak in the full awareness of what they are, confirm with extraordinary consistency. The ones who searched the hardest are the ones who carry the most when they find their way back. The depth of the forgetting is proportional to the depth of the remembering, and the remembering, when it comes, does not just restore what was there before. It reveals something that could only have been forged through the specific fire of this particular journey. You, not the pre-incarnation you, luminous and complete but untested, not the covered you, performing and surviving and quietly aching for something it could not name, but this you, the one that has lived all of this, the one that carries the wisdom of every wound, the depth of every searching, the particular quality of light that could only have been created by the precise combination of everything you have been through. That you is irreplaceable. That you is the whole point. Tonight, in the last moments before sleep receives you, do something simple. Place both hands over your heart. Feel the warmth. Feel the faithful, extraordinary rhythm beneath your palms that has never once abandoned you through any season of this journey. And breathe into this, not as affirmation, not as performance, but as the quietest, most honest recognition you have ever allowed yourself. I was always the one I was looking for, the self I searched for in other people, in achievements, in the approval of a world that could never fully see me, was here, was always here, has never been anywhere else. I am done searching outside for what lives within. I am ready to know myself truly, to live from that knowing, to let that knowing be enough. Let those words settle not into your mind, but into your body, into the bones, into the quiet space beneath the heartbeat where the true self has been waiting with the patience of something that always knew this moment would come. Receive them like water after a very long thirst. The world will continue to offer you versions of yourself, roles to inhabit, labels to accept, mirrors held up by people who can only reflect what they themselves have been able to see. You can receive all of that with grace and with love, because you will no longer need it to tell you who you are, because you will know, not perfectly, not without the continued unfolding that is simply the nature of a soul in a human life, but essentially in the way that matters, in the way that does not waver when the world's opinion shifts. You will know yourself the way the river knows its direction, not by deciding, but by simply being what you are. You did not find this transmission by accident. The part of you that is already awake, that has always been awake beneath everything, led you here, because it knew you were ready, because the season of searching had done its work, and the season of returning was beginning. Trust that. Trust the thread that brought you here, and trust where it leads next. If this channel has become a space where something in you recognizes itself, where the noise of the world quiets for a moment and what is real in you rises to the surface and breathes, then stay, not as a follower, not as a subscriber in the hollow sense, but as a soul choosing consciously and deliberately to continue its own returning. Every transmission here is another thread, another frequency, another gentle invitation back to the self that was never lost, only waiting, only ever waiting, for you to turn toward it with the willingness you are carrying right now in this moment. You were always the one you were looking for. You have always been enough. You have always been whole. Welcome home.